now that we have looked at the practitioner levels, I can explain, what I'm trying to achieve with this course and how this course is going to be structured and what you can hope to learn in this course. I think that it is dangerous to deploy an NLP system at level 1. So if you are at practitioner level 1, you follow some tutorial and you develop some NLP system, I think that level of knowledge is not enough to deploy an NLP solution that is worth it. Okay. And to explain that further, I help you, understand why I'm saying what I'm saying and where I'm coming from. You need to appreciate the fact that ML-based systems are probabilistic. So ML stands for machine learning, and modern NLP systems are powered by machine learning mostly, right? So modern NLP systems rely very heavily on machine learning. And because machine learning systems are probabilistic, not having a good level of knowledge in terms of how they work, but then proceeding to deploy systems based on them can be very problematic. Okay. So what do I mean by machine learning based systems are probabilistic? So if you're a developer, you probably written programs that do various things. Those programs that you've written tend to be deterministic. Okay. And because of that, when you don't really understand what you are doing, you can sort of, scrape by. Okay. Let me give an example. Supposing that for some reason your boss says, develop software that is able to compute the Fibonacci sequence. Okay. And, you don't know what the Fibonacci sequence is exactly, and you don't have an idea of how you are really going to solve it. Okay. But what you know is what the output of the Fibonacci sequence is supposed to be, right? So maybe you have what the first 5 numbers of the Fibonacci sequence supposed to be, what the first 10 numbers or what the first 15 numbers or 20 numbers and so on is supposed to be. So you Google, code for Fibonacci sequence, or how do I write Fibonacci sequence? And then you come across, maybe some code somewhere that is supposed to compute that Fibonacci sequence, right? So you copy the code and then you paste it in your own source code and you run the system. So let's say that the Fibonacci sequence takes an input n, where n is the number of elements in the sequence that you're supposed to write. So if n is 3, it means you are supposed to provide the first 3 elements in the sequence. If n is 10, then you are supposed to provide the first 10 elements of the sequence, right? So you get a code, and then you put it in your system, and then you run. Okay. And then you put in 3, and then you look at the output that you are getting and you compare it to the output that you're expecting, and it seems to be right? So you try another example. Maybe you put in 7, and then you look at the first 7 numbers of the sequence and compare it to the expected output, and it seems to be working, right? You do 10, you check, you compare, and it's working. So you say, oh, I have solved the problem. I have created a software that can compute the Fibonacci sequence. Let's go live with this, right? Now, you have, completely, you have solved the problem, right? In a sense, you have written software that's doing what your boss asked you to do, or seems to be doing what your boss asked you to do. without really understanding what Fibonacci sequence is, without understanding the way that it's been implemented. Okay. Now, I personally really don't like it when people put code in their program and are not really clear on what it's doing, right? For various reasons. I think it's a bad practice. One, you can run into some kinds of problems. So take the Fibonacci sequence, for instance. The solution you have is probably, recursive, right? So it's using recursion. And so you need to understand what's doing so that you can know, for instance, that depending on the memory that you have, your stack could overflow at some point, right? That could help you to say that, this is a limitation of our program. We won't accept, very huge numbers or certain numbers beyond a certain point. Why? Because we don't have enough memory to process it. And if we do this, our stack may overflow and our program may crash, right? So it's not a good idea to, I think, have code in your system that you're not really sure what they're doing, right? Also, just makes it harder, when you have to maintain the code or someone else comes and we sort of can't figure out what the code is doing, because it's just made up of, a lot of, spaghetti code, right? Code from different sources, and you don't really even know what's going on in your code, right? However, as far as correctness of the code goes, right? As far as the code being able to solve the problem that it's supposed to solve, you are probably fine, right? In the sense that if you compute the first, the Fibonacci is going for the first 10, the first 10 numbers in the sequence, right? And then you compare it to the output and it's correct. You do it for 7, it's correct. You do it for 12, it's correct. Chances are that if you do it for any number, it's going to work. That's the beauty about deterministic programs. If it works for some outputs, most likely it's going to work for almost any output that you will consider, right? Subject to maybe like the resources that your system has, right? Okay. Now, machine learning based systems, however, are not deterministic in that sense. So you build a chatbot and you give it some 10 questions, and your chatbot seems to be able to figure out what you are looking for and is able to give you that information, right? The fact that it has worked for some examples doesn't mean that it's going to work for other examples. It doesn't mean it's going to work for most examples, right? And so, because of that, it's very dangerous to, just do a system, not really understand what's going on in the system, but put the system out there for your users to use. You may get very surprising results, right? And I've kind of seen that as I have talked to people that are developing NLP systems, right? You put the system out there and it can't do much, really. All right. And so the point I'm trying to make is, because ML is probabilistic, right? And it's not deterministic. Just simply, following something that someone is doing is not enough. Even if it appears to give you good results for some examples, right? Because when it goes out there and, your real users are using it, you may have results that are completely unexpected. And so it's important that you have a better understanding of what you are doing. Have a certain sufficient level of understanding before going forward to deploy a system that relies heavily on machine learning. Okay. So I would say that, level 2 is okay, right? And level 3 is ideal, right? So level 2 is okay. You can, once you are practicing at that level and you have knowledge and enough knowledge and skill, right? You understand the limitations of the system, how to test and evaluate where the system may fail, and you have measures to mitigate those and so on. I'll say that's, fairly okay to deploy a system. You won't end up disappointing your users and hurting your brand and things like that. But I would say that, probably where you want to be as an NLP practitioner is level 3, right? Where you understand the concepts and the ideas and the techniques enough to be able to use an open source solution to build something. That's, I think, is probably where you want to be as a practitioner. Okay. So you may be wondering, so how about level 4 and 5? I think that, the higher you can go, the better, right? But, looking at the particular group that I'm targeting, right? People that are developers, but just want to be able to build an NLP system and put it out there. Being at level 3 is probably good enough, right? So, but of course, right, if you can improve your knowledge and move to level 4 and move to level 5, why not, right? Okay. So now, what is the aim of my course? I've titled my course NLP for Ghanaian practitioners, right? My goal is to take you from level 0 to level 3 speedily and contextually, right? What do I mean? So you may have seen that I didn't mention level 0, right? So level 0 is kind of like, you don't really know anything about NLP. You've never built an NLP system. You've not really tried it for anything. So, you don't know anything about NLP. That's totally okay. I'm kind of targeting people with even that kind of, that kind of, no knowledge in NLP. You'll be fine in this course. I don't assume any previous knowledge in NLP. Okay. And my goal is to take you from level 0 and then take you to level 1, then from level 1 to level 2, and then to level 3. And the goal is to do it speedily, right? So as you progress, right? So say you are level 0. To get you to level 1, I will focus on teaching you the ideas and concepts that are relevant to get you to level 1, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of times on concepts that are not relevant to making you level 1 practitioner. And then moving from level 1 to level 2, I also focus on really what you need to know in order to be at level 2. And similarly, when going to level 3, I'll focus on what you need to be at level 3, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time teaching and talking about theory that is not directly relevant to positioning you where we want you to be, right? So like I said, it's going to be speedily. It's not going to be like, the NLP course that I teach in undergrad. It's going to be very practical based. So we'll actually be building the system, right? And as we build the system, then I explain as we build the system, then I explain the concept. So it's going to be very practical. What I'll do is I'll take a specific problem, right? A scenario. So let's say, and I should say this. So we are going to take different tasks, right? So the first task I'm going to start with is chatbots, just because of how popular they've become these days. So we take a chatbot, take a scenario. So you're in a company, you provide these kinds of service, and your employer says, let's build a chatbot that we can deploy, right, for our system. And then, we'll move from level 0 to level 1, from level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3 for chatbots, right? Once you've gone through that whole cycle, right, then I'll take another important NLP task or application, maybe speech recognition. So your boss says, this is our app, we want to add a speech recognition functionality, right? Then, we go from level 0 to level 1, level 1 to level 2, level 2 to level 3. So that's how the course is structured, right? So it goes very fast. It's focused on the practical. The only theory you learn is the theory that's directly relevant to positioning you at the level that you are interested in, right? The final thing I'll say is that I'm considering the context in designing this course, right? So you can see that I have the Ghanaian practitioners, right? AI relies on context, okay? And NLP in particular, context is very, very important, okay? Let me give you an illustration. So a friend of mine who works with a US company was telling me once he told a friend, an American friend, that he will call her when he closes from work. And the friend was confused. He said, what do you mean by you close from work? Like, are you leaving your company or something like that. She just couldn't understand, right? So my friend was confused because we say, I close from work very often, So he called me and asked me that, well, the expression I've closed from work, which means that, Americans would say I'm getting off work, right? Like, it's the end of the day. This is the time I get off work, right? So he asked me, this expression of close from work, where is it from? I was like, where is it from? Like, everybody knows what it means to close from work. And he says, no, not everybody knows. I was also quite surprised, right? So I decided to Google like close from work, and I couldn't really find any information. So it doesn't appear that many people use the phrase close from work, right? So obviously, like if you were building an NLP system, the fact that, our context, we can understand this, but in another context, they can't understand this is very relevant, right? So in sort of designing this course, I'm thinking about, people in building sort of applications more or less for a Ghanaian context, right? So that will sort of feature as we go on. Another reason why this is important is because most of the libraries and platforms and data sets and things like that we rely on tend to be originally developed, within a Western context, and that can have an impact when you are trying to use it within your context. So I hope to also address some of these contextual issues to make sure that if you develop and deploy some NLP system for Ghanaians, the system works well, right? But I think the vast majority of the course would be relevant regardless of the context, right? So I hope you join and participate in this course. The course is available on aidennis.com, my website. All right. Okay, thank you and see you.